Welcome to the debut episode of the F Team. I'm your host, Hayden Van Roon. The F Team is a fortnightly podcast and webinar series where we discuss all things business technology. Today we'll be talking what's new in Surface hardware, new Microsoft Teams features that are coming to your laptops shortly, some open networking platforms from the networking and connectivity team, and much, much more. I'm excited to introduce our next guest. He's now a seasoned veteran of our webinar and podcast series. He's our hardware aficionado. He's the man with the best beard you've ever seen. I'm talking, of course, about Nathan Kettle. How are you, Nathan?
Not bad, Dos. How you been today, bud?
Pretty good, pretty good. It's a bit cold up here on Mount Dandenong, but we're getting there. It's beautiful country up here.
Just enjoy the views, mate. Let's talk about some
Indeed.
hardware.
Yes, indeed. So before we talk about the hardware, a little birdie told me that you've had a title change.
Oh, somewhat of a title change, correct? Yes.
Yeah. So what's the story with that? What's going on?
I'm now a hardware engineer for Fastrack, so a narrowing of my focus into the areas that I love the most. So it's been a very good change. Very welcome.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. I think I'm excited to see you in this role. It's certainly aligned to the passions that I've known you for a very long time, and this is something I know you're very passionate about. So it's good to see that you're in your element now. And now that we've got you in your element, I wanted to talk to you about Surface. So, like, what is it about the Surface series that has you interested, or what gets you excited about the Surface series?
The Surface series tends to have a solution for most use cases that you come across. It's a very well designed and very well executed package across most of the fronts. There's very rarely a major issue with the ecosystem, and when there is, it's usually fixed pretty quick. They're very well fit and finished. They sort of think along the same lines as your MacBooks. It seems to be the Microsoft and Windows equivalent of the Apple MacBook. They're usually very thin and light, good portable power and long battery life, and just really, really nice looking units too. So you don't look out of place in any of those high level meetings.
All right, so let's start with the big news, or news-ish. The heavy hitter of the Surface series was released in May, and that has most people at Fastrack pretty excited. I'm talking, of course, about the Surface Book 3. So obviously, Nathan, you're a hardware man. You're really excited about this one. So what is it about the Surface Book 3 that has made an impression on you?
What is it not about the Surface Book 3
All right,
that Ned don't like?
maybe we just need to dial down the fanboyness.
No. Out of all the
Yeah.
Surface lineup, the Surface Book usually gets me the most hyped. Mostly because of its capability. It's the dog that can do the most tricks, if I may borrow a phrase. So it's a much more powerful unit processing wise. It comes with inbuilt graphics, so it's got a lot more capacity to do higher workloads, but it's also a 2-in-1 device. So the screen can actually split from the keyboard and you can use it as a tablet. So if you need to go somewhere and the things are a bit tight, or you're on the go, you're on the move, you can put it into tablet mode, use it as a tablet, get back to your office. It's now desktop again. So it's got some really good flexibility.
That's pretty cool. I wish I had one.
I'm pushing for some upgrades.
Yeah, I need to market some more things. So like, who does it work best for?
Oh, well, it's mostly intended for power users, so content creators, web designers, developers, people that might even be after work gamers in your own time.
Right.
It's really good at CAD automation, app development, graphic design with all the extra hardware included. So if you find that a regular sort of office work laptop can't sort of fulfill the needs of the tasks that you're doing, then the Surface Book is what you need. It's essentially a desktop in a laptop.
That's pretty cool. And so what are the drawbacks of this device?
So some of the drawbacks would be it's a little bit heavier.
Yep.
So when you're talking portability from the total unit, it's a little bit heavier than a Surface Laptop 3, for instance. It also uses a lot more power, comparably. So the battery life isn't quite as long as a Surface Laptop 3, but if you're using it as a desktop to do heavy compute, then chances are you're plugged in anyway. So the major drawback is if you're out all day running really heavy compute, like video rendering or CAD automation, you may have a recharge point in that day. But overall, I think it does quite well.
I guess if you live in Melbourne, you're not having to take it anywhere, so not anytime soon anyway. So
that cloud has a silver lining, doesn't
yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah, very good. And how does it compare to competitors? I know that we're all Surface fanboys, but we know that it's got a particular target market. So like, how does it compare to some of the other devices in its kind of range?
So it can support up to 32 gigs of memory, which a lot of laptops struggle to support in most ranges. So it is a premium product. It looks like and feels like a premium product, and it supports premium capabilities. If anything, it's on the high end of the market. So it can be a little bit more expensive, TCO.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you do get that performance that goes with it.
Nice one. Very good. If you had to describe it in 3 words, only 3 words, how would you describe it?
Can I do 4?
Sure.
Can I have one?
Can I have one? All right.
Yes,
I'll bring it up the train.
Yeah, I think it's just got some really good design choices. All of the compute, for instance, is in the back of the screen rather than the bottom of the laptop. So if you're on a train, it's the middle of summer, you don't have all that heat sitting on your lap. It's going out the screen where it's not a problem. So I think there's just some really intelligent design choices. The strength of the hinge as well. It's a really cool designed hinge. It's got all these little segments to it. So I think they really excelled in the design level. And I think just thinking outside the box with all the flexibility, that's what makes me probably prefer it.
So the next topic I wanted to bring up was Surface earbuds. So for this one, it seems like anything Apple can do, Microsoft will do, but slightly differently. And that certainly seems to be the case for the Surface earbuds. So they were released in May of this year, so they've been around for a little while. They've got this really unique flat look about them. It's kind of like this product that I wouldn't have expected Microsoft to kind of go after. Nathan, what's your take on these things?
It feels to me, out of all of the Surface products, that this is possibly one of the most ambitious, and it almost feels like the future happening now, with the way they operate, the way they look, and the functionality that's starting to get incorporated into that particular piece of hardware. I don't know if there's some futuristic movie I can reference here where people have those holographic, PDF readers or
Minority Report,
something like that. But out of everything, this sort of feels like it's the closest to that sort of futuristic approach to technology. So it's definitely piqued interest.
What's the use case for these things? Like they seem a little bit pricey, and they seem like they're trying to be a little bit different in a fairly crowded market. So what sort of use case will suit the Surface earbuds, do you think?
So they can do everything that an earbud can do. They transport music, sound, all sorts of auditory responses to your ears. So from that perspective, they're no different from any other earbud. The real kicker is that it has capabilities and functions inbuilt that you don't usually see in an earbud. So you can actually use the earbud itself if you're using it to listen to your playlist, for instance, on Spotify. It has app integrations that you can just swipe it to fast forward or go to the next track, volume up and down. You can actually control everything from there, so you don't need to get your phone out and work on it that way. It's all it's all up here now. You can also do your call answering, call ending, things like that by interfacing with the earpieces themselves. Dictation to apps like Word and Outlook, you can have that app integration. And if you want to send an email, you can set it all up and just dictate your email and get it sent without having to touch a keyboard. It's also compatible with PowerPoint. You can run a PowerPoint presentation from your earbuds. So it's just wow. So someone could be standing in their presentation and just running through the slides by swiping their hands past their earpiece. It's just
you'd have to explain that to everyone before you started the presentation. Now I'm going to be touching my ear a lot, but it's not some kind of weird medical condition. It's just a Surface earbud.
Yeah, I didn't go swimming and got some waterlogged.
So obviously the people who shouldn't be looking at this is I guess anyone who just wants a to listen to music wirelessly, right? Is that fair to say?
If you're just looking for earbuds, then they're probably not the product for you. This is a real sort of power user integration scenario.
Mm,
It allows the user to push functionality to a device that they wear or slash carry, which keeps your hands free for other important tasks.
mm,
If you're in the middle of the kitchen chopping carrots for your dinner, and suddenly you need to fire off an email, some emergencies come across, you can just dictate it while you're doing your work. So it's certainly a very powerful tool, and I think one that more use cases will come up for as the technology and use case matures, because it is sort of almost like a first in class.
mm.
That it's an expanding space, and further functionalities and use cases will come forward as time progresses. So it's really interesting to see Microsoft so out in front on this.
Mm. It's interesting, like thinking about it, it feels like a real like business technology play in a a product product category that's really been owned by the consumer market as well.
Yeah, it does. It does get a little blurry there,
Yeah.
and I think that's a good thing, because why
Mm.
can't we get personal use out of something that you can use in and also in your work life? I think
Yeah.
it creates better value in the product, rather than
Mm.
having this is for work, this is for home. You know, mush the two together and
Mm.
more value. So, from that perspective, it is really good value. Just
Mm.
if you're not someone who can make use of those extra functionalities, then it's probably better off going for something like a Microsoft headset, or a Logitech headset, or something like that.
Got it. Yeah, nice one. And the most important question is, would you wear them? They've got this very unique circular look. They're very obvious in your ears. Would you wear them?
I would certainly give them a go.
Mm.
Obviously I'm not someone who's too concerned about his looks. I don't know if you've noticed, but what people think with my headphones in, I'm not really worried about, because
Mm.
you take the Apple earbuds for instance. They look like a piece of cigarettes hanging out your ear or something like that, whereas these are flat and flush. So I think they're
Yeah,
actually less visually invasive in that
got it.
respect.
Very good.
Hopefully there's like some sort of little cover you can put on there, and I can put a little like Hawks logo or something on there, so everyone can know that the Hawks are the best team in the AFL.
The next one I wanted to talk to you about was the Surface Go 2. So this is kind of like we touched on this hybrid tablet
Hmm.
technology before. So this has been around since about early May. The Surface Go 2, and it seems like a pretty handy device. Where does it fit into the Surface mix here? Because it kind of, yeah, it seems like it's a fairly unique play.
Yeah, it's certainly a bespoke device, but
Mm,
I feel like there's a lot of use case for it,
yeah.
for people on the go. That's obviously why they've called it a Surface Go, because if you're out there and you're on the move, you don't really have the capacity to be lugging around a heavy piece of equipment.
And
Uh,
also, the Surface on the Move is a terrible, terrible name. So, hence the
y-
Surface Go.
you're the marketing guru, so I'll bow to your knowledge on that one. Uh, so like it takes care of all the things that you might want to do when you're out and about. So catching up on your emails, you can doing online shopping, browsing content consumption, even streaming videos. Bored on a train trip, pop it out. Stream any sort of video content that you want. It's quite light. It's just over 0.5 kg, so you barely even notice you're carrying it. So if you're out all day and you're off desk, it's much easier to manage than say, a full size laptop while you're out and about, or even a larger tablet. So it's a 10.5-inch display, so it's not exactly small.
Mm,
It does quite a good job, and it's suitable for the general purpose tasks.
mm.
It has a 220 ppi screen, so it's actually quite pixel dense. So the resolution on it is really good. So HD movie streaming, very nice.
So, it sounds like that this is very much designed for non-power users. They're sort of maybe even a second device
Mhm.
to their main device. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, well, it's sort of, it's crossing that boundary between sort of where mobile phones stop, and tablets and smaller laptops begin, because there are just some tasks where your mobile phone is too small for. even if you've got a note or something along those lines, where the use case of a laptop just might not be comfortable. So it sort of fills that gap in between. And the big thing is it carries over LTE technology from the mobile device into this portable device, which most laptops don't support. So you can put a SIM card in it and you have 4G connection, or 3G if you live out my way. So there's no need to hotspot. So you don't have to get your phone out, hotspot to your laptop to get your mobile device up and running. It's just on the go the whole time.
And how does it compare in market to some of the other competitors out there?
It's a fairly niche piece of kit. I think it stands fairly alone. There are more and more of these devices coming out. The market is there for them, so many people are now starting to produce them. Like the folding Samsung phones that are being created. I think there's a version 2 of that, which is vastly improved over its version 1 iteration. So these sort of devices are becoming more popular, and I think we'll see more iterations of it. So as far as competitors go, I think the Surface Go stands above its competitors currently because it's better developed for the task at hand.
For me, I think, I probably wouldn't get one because I feel like my needs from a phone to laptop are pretty well met. But I think, for someone like our managing director or some of the other people, consultants on the team who are, on the road, on public transport, jumping between, consulting engagements or whatever. There's that also need to get those little tasks done, right?
Yeah, also like technology installations. So one of the things that we're working on outside of this discussion is automation and that sort of thing in the home and the office. So having something small, light and portable that's going to last all day that you can conduct those tasks on would be much more preferable than to be lugging your laptop around everywhere. Especially when you've got tools and bits of kit to install and stuff like that. You want to minimize your carry as much as possible.
I just wanted to give a quick plug to the Fastrack Store. So I believe that is publicly available now, particularly for our customers, and they can check out our broad range of Surface and other hardware on the device. On the store. So go check that out. You can expect our customers can expect some emails about how to get access to that, and we'll put a link in the description as well. So anything else from you before we sign off this segment, Nathan?
Just stay tuned for this because there's a lot of movement in the hardware space. And I think with the global situation, more and more people opting to work from home or finding the need to work from home. There's so much more we can do without having to be in an office. And we're finding that out. And it's been a pretty big revelation to a lot of companies. So keeping ahead of mobile technology is going to be a pretty big emphasis, I feel, in the next 12 months.
Definitely. I think we've all got to be on our toes and be adaptable and agile and all those terms that we throw around. It's never those wanky terms have never been more appropriate. So I think that's a good point. Well, it's been a pleasure, Nathan. Thank you so much.
It's been great talking to everyone.
Look forward to hearing your thoughts in the not too distant future. I'm excited to announce our next guests, starting with our leader of end user computing team. He's the dynamic Bart Ferguson. Welcome, Bart.
Hello, welcome. I'm happy to be here.
It's good to have you here, mate. And our Commander-in-Chief, the Aviator, I'm trying out that new nickname, Mr. Yoni Kirsch. Welcome, Yoni.
Hello, mate. How's it going?
Good. How do you feel about that?
For you? The Aviator.
The Aviator. Do you like it?
Yeah, it's not bad.
Not bad. All right. We'll see if we can.
What Aviator doesn't like?
Yeah, I would just accept the Leo reference, if anything.
The Leo reference.
DiCaprio.
Oh, right. You were saying that I'm a Leo.
No.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
Does that mean something?
No.
Well, I got a joke for you, Hados.
Yeah, hit me.
How do you know if someone's a pilot?
I don't know how.
He'll tell you.
Yes. Yep. Yes. I think that tracks well with the pilots that I know. In this segment, we're going to be talking all things Microsoft. There's been some cool developments in Microsoft Teams and in endpoint management that I'm excited to chat to the boys about. And hopefully there'll be some time for some discussion about some recent cybersecurity threats that businesses, Australian businesses in particular, should be looking out for. So let's kick it off. So one of the most publicized developments to hit Microsoft Teams, the release of Together Mode and the large gallery view. And I know that's something that everyone on this panel has been begging Microsoft for, particularly the gallery mode. And I feel like Together Mode might be just a nice to have, although looking into it, it seems like there's some differentiators in the product. So I'm keen to get everyone's thoughts on that. So let's start. But why don't you run us through the difference between Together Mode and Gallery View?
Yeah. So Microsoft has released this new feature. It's readily available now. You do need to go into your settings and make an adjustment in regards to accessing that new meeting experience. However, once you're there, it gives you the opportunity that when you're joining a meeting of 9 or more people, you're able to select 2 different functions. One being large gallery, in which you'll be kind of designated into little squares and allocated kind of evenly in your window. And then with the Together Mode, you're kind of put into a scenario of being in an auditorium or a real life situation whereby you get a different experience, and Microsoft believes that it kind of adds to the environment that you're working in or you're discussing with.
More realism, less fatigue of some kind.
Yeah. So I read a little bit about the online meeting fatigue, and I think it's got something to do with your ability to actually, with everyone on one screen, it allows you actually to make eye contact with everyone, and everyone has the same view. So in gallery mode, I think everyone
the tiles get laid out differently.
They get laid out differently for everyone. Whereas in Together Mode, everyone's looking at the same people.
You're very static in that. So it's kind of like you
adds to the opportunity for distraction of people like trying to high five each other and whatever else, right?
Yeah, which kind of contradicts the idea that you get more out of it working in that layout. But there are some cognitive reasoning behind it, because as you said, eye contact is a key part of communication, and sometimes you don't get that if you've got someone looking at their second screen reading off their information rather than looking directly at the camera. Or you kind of notice people not paying attention more so in that Together Mode, because you all in that same kind of structure and people are looking at each other more than anything else.
Yeah, and I guess a good point about, I think Yoni's first thing was, it gives you the opportunity to get distracted. And I think the value of this kind of new feature is that you do have both models, right? So if you do have, say, maybe a young team and you've got a full company meeting and you're discussing something really important and you don't want people distracted, then maybe gallery view's the tool for you. And
or is the distraction just because it's new and novel, and the distraction goes away after a minute when everyone gets used to it?
It could also be the background itself, like the fact that like an auditorium is the main one that they've released thus far. I'm sure they'll bring more into it, but if they put you in like an office scenario, something that you're used to, maybe that changes the perspective.
It's hard. How do you put people around a boardroom table?
I'm sure they could superimpose it somehow, but yeah, it'd be interesting if they do release different options within that.
Cam.
Yeah.
Need a really curved monitor to get the full experience. I don't know. It's an interesting play, right? It's probably worth, thinking about what's the catalyst to make all of these new view modes and everything that are going on, I mean, certainly current world events are the thing that drove this. Back at Christmas time last year, you could have a maximum of 4 video feeds up at one time in a Teams call. And still inexplicably so on a Teams room system. But yeah, obviously the move happened to move the normal gallery mode up to 9 9 video feeds, and that still wasn't enough. Like, we know that firsthand. On a Monday morning, we have our all hands meeting, and just like, it really detracted from the scenario. I think this time last year, it would be unusual for us to have more than 4 video feeds, because we'd have a couple of different meeting rooms in offices full of people, and sometimes 15 people in the boardroom next door here. It kind of cuts down the number of feeds quite dramatically. But
that's right.
All of a sudden, overnight, we found ourselves with everybody sitting in their bedroom or whatever at their house. I felt it. It's really hard to have a collaborative meeting with 20 people without being able to see everybody at the same time.
That's right.
I can only imagine other scenarios, like a teacher, like an educational based person or anything.
Imagine
like that. Yeah.
The kids that figure out that all they need to do is not speak, and their face will never appear on the feed.
Yeah. So I think Microsoft have done an all right job in releasing it, although the time frame of it is a key point of conjecture as well.
Yeah, they took, 4 months or whatever, of everyone begging them for it, arguably longer.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any insight as to why it took them so long to release this, and why it took?
It's immediately apparent that the catalyst for it took Microsoft by surprise. I mean, it took everybody by surprise. But Microsoft Teams is a big platform. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but there are many, many, many millions of users. Microsoft long since learned the lesson about shotgunning updates into production without a bit of rigor. And so 4 months to totally re-architect the way that they do the graphical layout in the meeting platform doesn't seem unreasonable to me.
And not only that, but Microsoft are forward thinking. There's new features and new functions that they've got in the pathways that if they didn't do this right the first time, then they're not going to be able to go back and change the implementation. So
yeah. Well, and that's evident, right? Because otherwise it would have been a simple change to go from 2x2 to 3x3 or whatever region it needs to be. Yeah. Obviously it required some significant rework, or it wouldn't have taken that long.
Yeah.
How do you get access to this? Does everyone have access to Together Mode and Gallery View right now, Bart? Or
they do, as long as they're updated to the latest version of Teams, and that new meeting experience option is checked within their team settings. The key thing to note is if users are using Teams and they don't see the new experience, the key thing is the bar, which normally you operate from the bottom in terms of answering your calls and sharing your content and everything like that, actually is at the top of the screen now.
And it'll be popped out into a new window.
Correct, that too.
Which, thank you.
Well, it everything, if you're using your Teams as your one-stop platform for your file sharing and your chat messages and everything else, it makes sense.
Yeah. Again, just, extra distraction features, making it easier to get distracted while you're on a call and go start IMing your mates.
Yeah. I mean, I've personally found that pop-out window so helpful, though. Just, I'm
absolutely.
I'm using Teams to do a lot of different things, and including different people in conversations, and just being able to have the two windows open simultaneously is amazing.
Feature request. It's still not quite right. The one thing that still needs work is the handling of content sharing inside a meeting. We're still in the position where we're forced to make a decision to choose between having a good video experience and having a good content sharing experience. When we're the recipient of the content sharing, which is just still really, really frustrating.
I think they're looking at pinning, like giving options to pin and rearranging the
pop out. You need to be able to pop out.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is, so with the large gallery mode, you can pin particular people. So, you've got 50 people in a call, and you can take the best looking people and you pin them so that they turn up bigger than everybody else. But you can't pin the content. I think it's a technical limitation, to be honest. I think there's still some challenges to work through in terms of how the content finds its way into the video feeds. I think they're kind of sitting in a different place at the moment. But that's the big clincher, is being able to have the content split out onto another window and perhaps even a different screen if you wanted to.
I know it's a personal pain of mine when you're in a meeting and you're listening to someone talk and you need to see what's on their screen. Sometimes it's like a planner board or something fairly Excel spreadsheet, and I don't want to. I want to see it there. I don't want it to go away, but I want to see the person who's talking to me fairly big. It's equally important to see that, and particularly for our business where, even pre world events, our team is very collaborative across Sydney and Melbourne. And
are we not saying the C word? Is that a thing?
Whatever. Like I'm just sick of saying it, to be honest.
Yeah.
COVID. Oh, it's behind me. But yeah, so I'm holding out for that, to be honest, because I'm sick of looking at an Excel spreadsheet and a tiny person down the bottom. I'm really holding out for that.
So it's not just me. You can switch, right? If you click on them, if you click on the thumbnail of the video feed, it puts the thumbnail big, and then it puts the screen sharing. That catches me out quite often. Often I'll do that because I would almost prefer to look at people's faces. Then the content they're sharing is 9 times out of 10 they're talking about it, so you don't really need to see it anyway. I quite often get caught out. So someone says, "Oh, if you look here," I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I actually wasn't. I had that minimized."
Well, yeah, I think what we can all agree on there is there's some pretty big stuff happening with Together Mode and different views, and I think that you want to just see that continue and see them continue to optimize it. And I don't think we're unlikely to see any slowdown on investment in Teams. It's a big thing. In fact, there's a couple other features I wanted to raise too.
Before you go, have you heard about what the NBA is doing with Together Mode?
No.
I heard this secondhand, but I heard that you can buy a ticket to the NBA, and you get put in, like, they're grouping people together, 50 people at a time. And then they've set up big TVs around the court. And
that's
so
crazy.
All the fans in Together Mode. So you're playing ball on the court. You can see, the whole groups of 50 people per TV.
That's cool.
Watching it. Yeah. And someone got excited. They had Shaquille O'Neal in their call,
I think
that's awesome.
There's a plan to do that for the NFL draft as well, coming up, something along those lines. So
I want to cover off some other topics before we run out of time. Live captions and transcripts is coming. It's announced, but it's not here yet. What are your thoughts on this, guys? The value of this live transcripts for Microsoft Teams meetings, for live meetings?
I think it's in a similar vein to some of the stuff that we talked about with the Together Mode and Gallery Mode. Sometimes you can get a bit distracted within a meeting, or you've got other priorities, and it's always handy to be able to go back to a transcript as it's live. There's also obviously the use case scenarios where someone might have a disability or not be able to communicate or understand.
Speaking English itis.
Yes, which is usually me more often than not. I don't know how my translations would actually appear sometimes.
You'll notice I've left you alone this morning, Bart.
Yeah, I'll put myself in it, but that's all good. But yeah, no, I think it's in preview at the moment. So I think there is some available options that people can implement for their meetings at this point with the latest update. So. I think it's a good addition. I think it's a needed addition. It's probably more of a niche, but they're tying it in with Microsoft Stream, so you can actually go search those transcripts and then be able to bring up that section of a video if you've missed it. So
yeah, that's the value, I think. Yeah.
OneNote has done this for years. So if you record an audio or a video memo or something in your OneNote book, then asynchronously after the fact, it transcribes the audio, and then if you go up in the top corner of OneNote and search for some string, then it will bring up that audio thing. So 2 minutes and 34 seconds into this audio, somebody spoke about barbecue chicken.
Yeah.
and it's got. I think that's a good point, Bart. The searchability is one big side to it, as you say, with it integrated in with Stream, the ability to go into your, and do a SharePoint search or search everything from your Microsoft world, and in one place find keywords from your email, from your Teams conversations, from your files, and from recordings of meetings that you had. It's incredibly powerful. So if you think the two main use cases for this is searchability, so from a data point of view, and then globalization, communication, improving communications, either because you need to translate it into a different language, or you just need to make it available for someone who's hearing impaired or whatever it is. It's not new functionality in either case. So PowerPoint, as you say, has had the live transcription and translation captions on the go for a little while now, a couple of years, I think, in general availability. And OneNote's had the transcription. I mean, we've gotten pretty good with speech to text by this point. A few small platforms out there in the world, most of them with female names associated with them. We've gotten to a level of maturity that we should be able to do this stuff pretty easily. And I, for one, think it's a pretty good thing. Being able to translate stuff through Teams, whether it's via video or IM or whatever, is pretty powerful. We have some business partners that we work with that we communicate over Teams with, and you can tell that they're not reading my messages in English. And they're not writing messages back in English. And it's pretty awesome being able to have an IM conversation with someone in a different language.
The virtual breakout rooms. This is a feature that's got 15,000 votes on the last time I checked on the Teams user forums. And it's now on the product roadmap.
How many did the large gallery view have?
I didn't check that.
I think it had 40,000 before it got implemented, something along those lines.
Yeah.
So, but no need to keep upvoting this one. It's on the product roadmap unless you're unhappy with the timings associated. But I think it's scheduled to arrive sometime in this calendar year.
It's scheduled for Q4.
Q4, okay.
By the looks of it, they've got a roadmap of starting in October onwards. So it'll be released per license.
So if anyone who's not familiar with virtual breakout rooms, Bart, do you want to just take us through what that actually is, what that functionality is?
Essentially, if you have a large meeting, say 50 people or so, it means that you can break them out into individual smaller meetings and then be able to allocate them in a means that you need to, whether that is randomly. So you could have a group of 20 people get randomly selected into 4 different virtual rooms, and then they can go off and have a discussion about a topic and then come back as an entirety of the meeting to kind of have an overview of what was discussed. A lot of the people that would have upvoted that were from educational based institutions where that, content sharing from a meeting perspective is really adds a lot of value to their core business. So having that availability to do that, and I think the key thing that they're trying to do is link that into the channel system within Teams as well. So you can have an individual breakout room tied to a channel, and then they can have their own files and their own conversations within that channel post breakout meeting. So there's some cool things that they're trying to do in trying to break out it from being such a large meeting into individual rooms, so to speak.
Feels like a fairly niche use case to have so many upvotes. Anything?
Well, yeah, it's got them though. I think.
Yeah, I know.
It's got to be driven by the education sector. Like I haven't really found, or professional services as well. If you're in a consulting business and you work with big teams, I think there's probably a need there. But you're right. Like it's not a feature that I've been hanging out for.
One heck of a consulting engagement where you needed to constantly be breaking out into subgroups, and I think training, you're right, is the go. Anyway,
I think
cool.
it's coming Q4. So
everybody else built it. There must be demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of other features I just wanted to flag for people to go check out. One exciting one is Teams Rooms remote. So it basically turns your device into a remote control for Microsoft Teams Rooms, which is pretty cool. There's some Cortana integration
you can only have
coming.
four video streams on it.
Yeah, I'd be downvoting the Teams remote and asking for the Teams rooms to be updated before that one. Cortana integration's coming too, which is going to be pretty cool.
That'll be cool if they tie it in with Teams voice or Teams calling, because then you can ask Cortana to make a call
She who shall
for you.
not be named.
Indeed,
I think you've got Cortana switched on. Cortana.
There's also suggested replies coming. So basically, if someone's annoying you and you're in a meeting, there's suggested replies that you can say go away. So that's what I'm looking forward to. There's live reactions, I think, which is going to be pretty cool. So
I seem to have mastered that manually. I don't need any suggestions. Can we back up a sec, Hayden, or are we getting the hurry up here?
Let's back up.
No, I just wanted to talk about the Teams Room remote for a second.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
That's an interesting play. At the moment, you need to have a touchscreen wired into your Teams Room system, in order for that to have that functionality to control it. And having something that can be a bit more portable than that could be an interesting use case for some people. I think the best experience will always be with a fully wired kind of setup, and you've got more flexibility in that regard. But yeah, certainly having the option is not a bad thing. Zoom's had that for quite a while, that if you didn't want to have a wired whatever, you could just have an iPad sitting there.
The other ones I wanted to raise was the live reactions. So I think this ties into what we were talking about with meeting fatigue. And so I know with like a large gallery view, if you're talking, say, in a town hall kind of scenario, and there's lots of and you're the main person speaking, a good way to get a sense of everyone's reactions. It's very hard when you're looking at 20 people on a screen to get a feel for how everyone's feeling about what you're saying or the content you're delivering. So being able to just have those built-in reacts, essentially, as in like there's a clap hands and a thumbs up and all that sort of stuff, that's coming. And I think that's actually going to be more powerful than I think you might first think. And the other one is video filters. So I know there are some limitations with webcams, and some of the older webcams don't always work the way you'd expect them to, or they have trouble with lighting. And so being able, the video filters will allow you to actually in-app adjust contrast and brightness. So I think, again, that's going to be really powerful, just again, building on the flexibility of the Teams platform. So I'm excited about that as well.
Is it worth talking about Teams Business Voice?
Oh, yes.
Now being available in Australia is probably that's topical. So for those of you not up to date on this, Microsoft Teams has an add-on license that you can buy called Phone System that allows you to talk to through your favorite Teams calling provider. Mine's Fastrack. To make and receive calls from the old-fashioned PSTN network. So the limitation up until now in Australia has been that you couldn't add that license onto anything other than an E1 or an E3 Office or Microsoft 365 license, which excluded a whole bunch of the market, including people on the very popular Microsoft 365 Business plan, which is a great value plan that's very, very popular at the moment. So there's a new license, Microsoft Business Voice, has been released in the last few weeks, which includes the license to use the phone system as well as audio conferencing as well, Bart?
Yes, that's correct. So it ties basically both those together and gives the ability that add-on business voice license can be added to any of the business-based licensing. So
licenses. What about FSQs?
FSQs, there's some caveats around that, but the same business voice license can go on to some of the not-for-profit based licensing and education licensing now.
Yep.
So yeah, we'll have some more details about the full scope of licensing available if needed.
So that's really exciting. I know we've got a bunch of M365 business customers that have been quite keen to get their hands on that Teams calling functionality, but haven't been able to due to that licensing limitation. So that's a cool thing.
I am somewhat excited to introduce our next guest. He's our team leader of connectivity, Bilal Chisti. A lukewarm welcome to you, given that you're a half an hour late to the scheduled production time. So thanks for your tardiness. Appreciate you making some of your time available to us.
Considering my timing, that's early. You should be thankful.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's Bilal you're talking about. I'm stoked that he turned up at all.
Yes, I'm very thankful the fact that you actually turned up at all. So it's good to have you here. I wanted to talk to you, to Bilal and Yoni, to you guys today about some of the challenges our more geographically dispersed organizations are. So we've got some customers who have very geographically dispersed customer base, but a fairly local presence in terms of data center presence and where their environment lives. And as a result, some of these customers, some of our clients' customers who are accessing our clients' services have run into some latency issues. And we've come up with some different ways of solving those challenges and allowing our customers or our clients to reach new markets and access new customers in new markets. And I'm keen to hear how we went about solving those. So, Bilal, do you want to take us through those?
Yeah, sure thing.
Nothing alike.
Oh, the people can't see, right? So
they can see. Yeah,
okay,
that's why we're filming.
Yeah. Okay, so to start off, like some of our customers, like just not our customers, like business in general, like more and more people are like moving towards the cloud, and you are having more and more resources which are being accessed remotely, just not from on premises, and especially since post-COVID as well, like you have very small part of the workforce which is actually inside the office, which is now accessing those services via the corporate WAN. So you're coming in from the outside. Suppose, for example, a company is based in, say, Australia, in Sydney, but they have customer bases here in Singapore, in India, in Hong Kong, so on and so forth. So if they have their resources based here, or those customers will be coming in from abroad, and the latency from those locations might not be the best. It might be, it might not be. The issue is the variance. One day you might be getting a pretty good one day you might be getting a poor one, and that is an area which is completely outside your control, because that is completely upstream.
The great unwashed internet.
Yes. So how do you try and solve this one? Like, how do you manage that latency to take it from an unmanageable one and get into either a manageable range or like a pretty decent range, which suddenly allows a whole new market for you to open up? Customers which were complaining and were not getting good experience now can get one. And for that, the virtual point of presence is one of the reasons, like one of the things that we're pushing some of our customers as well, who have this sort of unique business case. So what that basically is, we have a point of presence nearer to the clients, the customers, the end customer, the end user actually. And we funnel traffic to that point of presence. So now you're shortening the distance from the end user to the point of presence, which has to go over the public internet. The smaller that is, the lower the variance, and the less chance that there will be like more latency issues. From there onwards, you can certainly on-road that traffic onto a dedicated link between data centers, between those point of presence. So say between Singapore and Sydney. And that's a dedicated link that has SLAs. So if you have higher latency, you can actually go to the provider and say, okay, this is what the issue that we're having. This is what the agreement was. And suddenly you have cut down that latency, and you also have a sort of guarantee that, okay, it'll be within a certain range. And
Yeah.
it's especially noticeable for end user, especially if it's a web-based application or it's in a remote desktop application or a VDI environment, and it makes a massive difference for them.
So this is not a new concept, right, Bilal? Like cloud providers have been playing this game for a long time now. You know, when Microsoft got into the kind of enterprise cloud SaaS space with, you know, vPOS, then Office 365, they started that process with the fantastic asset under their belt of the third biggest IP network in the world, right?
Yep.
So they owned all of the MSN fiber and all of that, all of those assets. And you could see that evident in the way that they designed their network was really quite clever. So they're, you know, optimizing for user experience, right? So rather than leaving it up to the great unwashed internet to decide, like you say, there's too much variance. The concept is,
that's sort of the way which AWS goes, right?
it's the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So AWS tend to optimize for cost, right? So they'll leave you on the internet where they're not paying the bill until the very last minute, and then they'll bring you on only local to the data center to keep the costs of running that network down. But to be fair, you know, Microsoft had that asset available to them, and as a result, have been able to take this what's called cold potato routing approach, right?
Yep.
So to get the potato as quickly as you can and keep it, you know, within your realm of control for as long as possible, which is ultimately the concept that you're describing here.
Exactly. The only difference is in that case, you're basically tied into Microsoft's network, right? So if you have resources in Azure and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But if you have your own on-prem infrastructure and if you're not tied to one cloud provider, then the solutions that you have sort of become less and less. Like there's not much in the market.
I'm not saying use Microsoft's network. I'm saying steal their idea.
Exactly. And you can apply to anything else as well. Like you can have your own custom ranges, like your own IP network, advertise what you want. You suddenly have a far larger degree of control over it as well. Whereas with other services, you're basically depending upon how they do it. So there's like more control in this case, and you can tailor it according to your specific needs and depending upon the location as well. Yeah,
I think that's right. You can tune it up to get that, you know, cost versus user experience analysis ratio correct.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a bunch of different use cases here. You kind of only been speaking to the my customer or my end user is not near my platform scenario.
Yeah.
That kind of isolates the whole another set of use cases that we've probably seen even more frequently, where some provider or some source of data that I need to be close to my platform is not close to me, and I'm forced over the internet to use it.
Yeah, which are very sensitive to jitter and packet loss. So in that case, like you're not that much worried about latency, but jitter and packet loss, those are of the utmost importance. If you're sending a database call, you want it to go through, no matter what the other end system is, maybe financial or something else. So yeah.
Yeah, so I was going to say financial services, we're seeing a lot of that stuff. Niche connectivity solutions for financial services, big at the moment, but it's not limited to them. It's anywhere where your platform is, you know, kind of not in the same location as your providers.
Yeah. And I think another thing as well, like once you spread it out, you still have other controls. So in those different virtual points of presence, you don't really have a DC presence. You're not investing in hardware, but you can still connect to other cloud providers in different regions and connect them to your network and out. Basically, whatever your problem you're trying to solve, you can sort of augment it into this one and make it like one cohesive thing rather than just having random different things lying about. You can just have one central thing which ties everything together.
Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, it's all about expanding your sphere of influence over the user experience at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it gives you more options as well. Like, for example, one of our clients, like they wanted to go with a third-party vendor. They didn't like anyone's in Australia. Like, okay, they went with someone abroad, in the UK in this case. But if they were if they didn't have that option, they would have had to do business with someone whose business practices or everything else they did not agree with.
Mm-hmm.
So
Nice one, guys. And sorry, I just had some internet issues before, which is funny given the topics we're just discussing. So, are there any kind of use cases where, virtual POP might not be, well suited to?
Yeah, for sure. At the end of the day, there's, we were talking about Microsoft earlier whilst you were off, enjoying the benefits of Australia's national broadband network. And we were talking about how Microsoft use their network assets to improve the user experience with cold potato routing. So to answer your question, I think the scenarios where that isn't going to work is at some point the speed of light comes into play. And so, you can certainly optimize a user experience. You can remove the variance that's present on the internet, but you can't make two locations. You can't make light travel between two locations faster than it does.
you can't open a wormhole. Yeah.
Sorry?
You can't open a wormhole.
Yeah. So I think that those scenarios are where, network tuning is never going to replace geographic spread from a global service provider's point of view. And then it comes down to your application. What are the requirements for an acceptable user experience? So there's a huge amount of variance even within web applications. Some web applications will suffer latency very, very well. I mean, HTML is the language, or the HTTP protocol was written for data connections that were far less stable and far less performant than the ones that we have today. So, but people are doing things with it now that I don't think were ever envisaged. But yeah, even within a web-based application, there are some applications that will work just fine with a second of latency on them, and there are some that just simply won't. So yeah, I think that's probably the key scenario here is the situations where the latency is just too high, regardless of what you do with it. Sometimes there's just no substitute for being local. And then the other scenarios where it wouldn't be a good idea is where it just doesn't matter.
Thanks, guys. The other topic I wanted to raise today was around open source networking. So there's a bit of a trend that we've noticed over the last few years towards embracing open source networking and moving away from proprietary networking solutions. So I'm keen to get both your thoughts on kind of what's kind of motivated this trend towards open source and what the kind of benefits and challenges associated with it are. So I might start with you, Bilal. What are your thoughts on this?
I think primarily cost.
Yeah.
So if you're going with a proprietary company, you're just not paying for the hardware, you're just paying for the R&D, you're paying for the support, you're paying for the IP, and so on and so forth. And then you're paying for the premium on top of that. So it really ramps up. And in a lot of cases where you're looking at a certain product and you're looking at a certain problem and trying to use that product to solve that problem, the price just makes it prohibitive and you might need to downgrade, so on and so forth. That is where basically open source networking has come in. Initially, it was more to do with open source software, but now open source like hardware, like vendor agnostic hardware, is coming more and more popular as well, and it's matured pretty rapidly over the last couple of years. And it's not the same situation it was years ago where you're looking at an inferior product from a QA perspective. They're made in the same factories. They're made by the same people as the high-end products. It's the same parent company who's reselling one to one vendor and one to an open sourcing one. One just doesn't have the glitzy name on top of it. The feature sets are the hardware-wise, they're pretty similar now. And plus, if you have a vendor agnostic hardware, you can choose whatever you want to imply on it. So you can have different sort of stuff and you can have the same OS on it, makes it easy to manage. And even the operating systems as well, they're being developed at a pretty rapid rate, and they're becoming more mature as well. So even some of the open source projects now have like proper support cases, like you have SLAs and such, and they become pretty mature. For example, primarily like, if you're talking about routing, you have VIOS, and in switching, you have Cumulus. An example, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, sir.
I find it quite interesting that you called out cost as the primary factor driving open networking. You know, because it would have been a bit further down my list, to be honest.
Okay.
For me, it's about flexibility.
Yeah.
You know, so it's no secret that Fastrack is a huge advocate and an adopter of VIOS as our routing platform, and we use that in a lot of cases in virtual machines, but also broadly adopted using different hardware platforms as well. Some of our own that we manufacture, and some that we other x86 hardware that we run it on. And for me, the benefit of open networking is that it allows us to select the hardware that's fit for purpose, or lack of hardware in the case of virtual machine, the platform, you might say, and then choose the software to go with it and still have a consistent experience supporting and managing that platform, regardless of whether you're logging into a virtual machine or a Intel based PC or some SoC thing that we've put together, or whatever it is. It's consistent. So it's that decoupling of the hardware from the software solution that allows you to select both of them independently gives you a lot more flexibility to build a solution that meets your requirements.
Exactly. If you want a router with a specific, like, certain NIC configuration, certain hardware CPU consideration, you can buy that particular one rather than being tied to a certain series. Okay, you can only buy this one, then there's a huge jump, and then you have the old 100 gig, whatever it is. You can I completely agree.
And
with that.
as the guy who's charged with supporting this stuff, you can say to your team that that they can learn one platform and they can support one platform, rather than being told, oh well, look, we wanted to go to 100 gig networking on this particular POP, so we had to go with a different brand which has a different operating system on it and a whole different platform to learn. It's tricky. You can understand all the networking concepts, but if you're constantly trying to look up CLI guides to figure out how to configure different devices, it becomes hard to manage. So that's the big benefit for me, is the flexibility.
Yes.
Also, it's a really different experience dealing with the support community on
I was going to say the same thing,
networking products. You call the Ciscos or the Fortinets of the world for support. You go into a queue and you get a very kind of impersonal support experience, which in some cases is better. Sometimes you just fix my problem and like the clock's ticking, pal. But on other occasions where you're a bit more relaxed about the situation, being able to jump in a forum or in a chat, some Slack channel or whatever the platform uses, and get community-based support that's far more loving and personal and caring. Often I prefer that kind of experience.
I feel that, especially when you're trying to implement a service. So like with the other historic major vendors, if you're on a support case, they're pretty decent. But when you're implementing a service, then that's mostly okay, that doesn't really fall into our bucket, and they'll sort of push back and
go talk to the professional services team.
Yeah. And then that'll be a consulting gig somewhere else as well. Whereas with the open source, it's a very tight-knit community as well, and then they're very open to share information. So what worked for them, they'll let you know the use cases, and the freer the flow of information. For me, I think it's just the more preferable solution in that case.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about a lot of big organizations going that way, right?
Yeah. So I was actually going to say, it's just not smaller organizations as well. For example, London Internet Exchange, one of the largest internet exchanges in the world, they have the LON 1 and the LON 2 POPs. The London 2 POP is now completely gone to open source networking. I believe they've mostly gone with edge core networking on their switch stacks, but that's pretty amazing. London Internet Exchange is like one of the cornerstones of the public internet, and like a major chunk of it is now on open source networking.
Yeah, there's about a third of the internet's routes are on that. Last time I checked.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone are the days where the big internet routers in London and Munich, you know, around the place, they're all like, it was Brocade MLX. That's all it was, you know. Yeah. You're right. It's a pretty big marker that organizations like that are moving to open networking.
Yeah.
I don't think they're doing it because of the cost.
I don't think so. Because they're like, yeah. For them, I completely agree with you. Like just the flexibility as well, because with these internet exchanges, because they have like dynamic changes, like they have loads of customers who need like 100 gig ports, 10 gig ports, everything else. They can now deploy whatever they need according to the requirements rather than just going through a set one. Yeah, yep. Definitely.
You know, it's interesting to think about, right? Like quite a few years back, the challenge with because when open networking, like network function virtualization, you know, and these things were all kind of merging, these concepts were all starting to crystallize a little bit before you were in the game, Bilal. That one of the big challenges that we faced was that all of the startup projects, the open source projects, they were all being bought and sold all over the place. So, you know, we've been talking about Vios, the routing platform, used to be called Viata. That was the open source platform. Yep. And then Brocade bought Viata. And then for a while they had that, and, you know, that there was a pretty good experience there. And then eventually it got sold around. And it ended up with the biggest implementation. Viata actually ended up being bought by AT&T, who had the biggest implementation of it, and so they didn't care too much about supporting anybody else. Yeah. And so oftentimes, you know, you have to get your head to stop spinning, trying to keep up with the acquisitions and pass the parcel of these platforms, and that can be a bit of a bit of a downer when you're trying to look for something that's stable and easy to manage. You don't know where your support's going to come from next month. But yeah, funnily enough, it seems to have been going on in the proprietary hardware space, you know, as well over the last 2 years. So like you can't really get away from it now, right?
Exactly. But I felt like a general trend over the last couple of years, just with the advent of crowdfunding and such, I think more and more smaller companies are now resistant to that one until like they become more and more mature. So it's just not in this space, it's just generally across the board as well.
Yeah, I think that's true. And like, if you pick the right platforms that say, oh, you know, we'll never sell out and we're going to be open source forever, you know, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky game to be playing. Like, you saw Cumulus got bought by Mellanox recently.
Oh, okay.
So Mellanox being one of the biggest manufacturers of open source switching hardware that runs Cumulus, now owns Cumulus. So what is that going to mean for everybody else? Like, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So if you were, you know, rolling Edge Core with Cumulus on it, I wonder what they're thinking about how the product's development's going to change.
Definitely.
Just to round out the discussion, because we're running out of time. Do you lose anything by moving away from a proprietary-based networking gear and going to open source? Is there, you know, just playing devil's advocate here?
Yeah. Well, you do. I mean, you're in a scenario where ultimately you're replacing one vendor or one throat to choke with two. So you'll have a hardware vendor and then you'll have a software vendor. Whether you pay them money or not is another question. And so, you know, you lose that, hey, we paid you lots of money, make this work now, please, thing that you can, you
lose that card.
Yeah. And, you know, to be honest, network hardware, has always been very reliable. And so generally when something's not right with a network device, it's in the firmware or the software that runs on it. And so, you move away from a proprietary, the Ciscos of the world. You lose that kind of level of support agreement that you might otherwise come to expect. But that being said, as Bilal mentioned, some of the open networking software projects have really good quality professional support that you can pay for now and still be miles out in front from a commercial point of view. And so, you buy a support plan for Cumulus just the same as you would for your Cisco Nexus switch. And yeah, so I don't know, maybe I've talked myself out of the thing that I said you lose, to answer your question.
So you lose.
Also, depends like how much you're invested in one platform as well. So if your entire organization is on one platform, it makes it a bit more difficult to move. Like you can do piece by piece. But if you're like already have multiple vendors, then you already have an issue where like it's just too much segregated. In that case, it sort of makes sense to like unify and just make it easy to support it internally and externally.
Yeah, and also people is a challenge. It's if your primary concern was being able to find people to support and manage your platform, then you'd pick Cisco every time because it's the de facto industry standard. But it doesn't mean that they're the only guys doing good stuff out there, and it doesn't mean that the price is right. But it can be a challenge, sometimes if you're trying to hire network engineers, oftentimes you'll find people that'll turn their nose up at open networking and, other vendors. So it's still not quite mainstream everywhere yet, but I don't think that's the end of the world, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Anything else, Bilal, that you lose?
That's pretty much it. No, that's pretty much it, I guess so. Yeah.
So sounds like it's about knowing what you lose and working around it. So if you're losing that, if you're adding a throat to choke, we'll just build around a process around making sure that you can choke two throats simultaneously.
It's not so much building around because you have to remember there's also great positives as well regarding the flexibility, the ease of use, and commercials as well.
Yeah.
And then you have the other sides, and you want to balance them out and see for your use case like what makes sense. Yeah. Because in some cases the commercials difference can be quite massive as well. And the ease of use is having a standard thing across your organization. Again, if it makes it easier to use, it means that you're going to probably have less problems.
Yeah, I know where I sit.
Where do you sit?
I'm for our platform, the open source platforms that we use service very well.
They use them in very different
innovate.
situations.
There's, I'm not sure what it is that we're missing out on not having not having a Cisco support plan in place, and rather having access to the vast community of people who actually care, to solve these problems.
I think that's a good place to wrap up, lads. So thanks so much for joining me, and it's great having you on, and hopefully see you back in a couple of weeks when we tackle another big networking challenge or opportunity. So thanks.
Yeah, it was good to have you here for the 3 minutes that your MDN was working.
Got to plug in that Ethernet cable next time. All right, thanks guys.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining our very first episode of the F-Team. I hope you've had half as much fun listening to it as we did making it. If you have any questions about anything you heard today, you can send us an email via info@ftpl.com.au. See you next time.